And I can tell you that 3 years later, they reduced costs by 70% and increased onboarding by, I think, the same amount, 70%, and completion rates went through the ceiling, through the roof.
It was very evident in the data to be able to see where we needed to improve upon friction opportunities and lower levels of conversion rates.
I really think the trick has been that going back to that under the hood conversation. So a great example of this is if we're going to do enhancements, and I know that's coming, I'm going to go to my digital leadership and say, hey, if we're going to go do this, I also want to redesign the whole thing. Give it that new coat of paint, that new design system overhaul while we're in there.
You're competing for customers and the customers' attention to your.
Hello, and welcome to The Frictionless Experience, the podcast where we lay waste to digital friction. I'm Chuck Moxley.
And I'm Nick Palladino.
How do you get executive level support for removing friction from your customers' digital experiences? Over 4 episodes, we spoke to 4 digital leaders who have mastered the art of removing digital friction and elevating user experiences to their leadership. And today, we're revealing the 3 most important takeaways we saw in these 4 episodes. Joining Nick and I today is Dom Costa, who is normally behind the scenes helping to coordinate and produce the Frictionless Experience. Welcome, Dom.
Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Yeah, good to have you on the front side of the camera instead of behind the scenes. All right, so let's talk about the first big idea. And what we heard consistently was the key to elevating frictionless experiences or solving frictionless experiences was quantifying the impact of removing that friction and then using that quantification to justify getting that additional spending. So one of the questions that we asked was, how do you get buy-in from executive leadership that friction is a problem worth investing in? And Nick, what are your thoughts on that general topic and sort of what we heard before we start playing some clips?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is understanding how to quantify, and that doesn't necessarily mean just revenue, but obviously a lot of times that bubbles up into revenue. How to quantify your effort and understand what it means to be able to take that and turn that into a meaningful output for your business. Because when push comes to shove, most of us work for a for-profit, and if you're a non-for-profit, then you're actually going to still be functioning on how do we get more budget dollars to be able to continue down our nonprofit. So as we're thinking about everything that we're doing, we're all having to figure out how to make sure it's making us put one foot forward after the next and moving the needle in the right direction. So when it comes down to getting priority, it's helping to make sure that you provide a meaningful number behind the specific research element that you're going after.
Well, one of the things that I think about, we've talked to guests from a lot of pretty substantial brands, brands that have significant volumes of traffic coming to their website, millions of people a month. And so these changes at any given time, all the whatever friction points they find on their website, those fixes may not be cheap to fix. There could be some significant cost in it. So it's that having that quantification gives the justification to spend the investment it's going to take, because no company wants to spend whatever that is, $50,000, $100,000 in combination of time and other resources, if they can't see a clear line to why that makes sense. So I think that was one reason we saw that as that consistent theme across all the episodes. All right, well, Dom, let's listen to a clip then. What's our first clip?
Sure, Chuck. The first clip comes from VJ, who's the Senior Director of Product at Walmart e-commerce, who talked about correlating it to peak seasonal periods, since if there's an issue present then, the financial impact could be substantial.
About this stuff. I mean, this really goes back to the topic of this podcast, which is really to say, hey, how do we elevate this digital mentality up to our C-suite so that we understand how to create that priority? Because being able to create these frictionless experiences for our customers means failing gracefully.
That's correct.
I love it.
Very important for the executives, because things could work fine on a normal day when everything is even, right? And everything flows easily, and that's okay. And there comes a big day that comes up, right? Be it Black Friday, Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, Super Bowl Sunday, whatever it might be. On that day, your product needs to be working really, really well, because because that's when all the traffic is. People are depending on you to like solve a problem that they have, solve a need that they have. So, be there when people really need them. And for that, you gotta like do all these kind of destructive testing, to your point, Nick, and see like at what point does it fail? Do I have the system scaled up in such a way that, it is going to like, hold up to the test of all this traffic coming in and wanting the same items? How are you going to manage it? All of those things comes into play.
So, how do you elevate that conversation to leadership? What are the ways that you tie your team's efforts to business outcomes in a way that the support that you need from Walmart's leadership?
See, as long as you like, for us, like, talked about it a few times in this podcast, like we focus a lot on customers, serving customers and being able to be in that servant leadership role is huge within this company and in other companies that we're part of, right? As long as you're able to tie it back to customers, how many customers it could impact, and tell that story to say like, hey, we have a problem over here, and move all the technical jargons out of it, rather like make it as personable as possible and say like, hey, if we were to like have this problem and come like Black Friday, this were to happen, then this is going to impact like these many number of millions of customers and in under an hour. We have like this problem very soon.
Yeah, and on that, if you make a flaw for an hour on Black Friday, people really treat it like a limited number of dollars, that you're not competing in the same vertical anymore. You're just competing for a total number of dollars anybody's willing to spend on Black Friday, because they might end up saying, hey, you know what? I don't even want to shop at Walmart anymore. I want to go shop somewhere else because I'm also looking for this other thing, whatever it may be. Might not even be an item you're even trying to compete with at all, right? It might be a subscription to YouTube. I don't know. Like I'm making it up on the spot as much as I can, but you kind of get the point of where I'm going. You're not really competing on a big day like that for your vertical. You're competing for just dollars.
That's right. You're competing for customers and customers' attention to your brand and the trust that you want to continue to. If people can't trust your website or your digital experience, like, hey, every time I go there, it's an easy experience. I can buy it. It comes to my house. Nothing fail. Then they keep going there.
Yeah, it's that consistently frictionless experience that builds that customer loyalty and trust.
So I think what really resonates with me on this one that is just so important is to understand why you need to go focus on such a unique day like Black Friday or Cyber Monday or Super Bowl, because as you're starting to elevate these concepts, you can start to quantify what seems like trivial, just noise in a specific day, any individual day that is not, within that seasonality. You can elevate that concept to your executives and show the importance of solving it today because of what you can quantify for such a large day like Black Friday. You go down on Black Friday because you have some leading indicator that exists within the data today, then that leading indicator, if left untouched, is going to create that big problem. So by taking this mentality of looking at the peak season, you'll be able to understand how to attack your problems today by bringing that concept and saying, hey, today I might have, 10,000 people impacted. But when that gets exaggerated and we end up hitting a problem of capacity, that could be millions. And that could mean a lot of people that aren't spending money with you and not building trust with you. And honestly, on a day like that, it's also first impressions. A lot of it is first impressions. It's the first time they come to your brand because they happen to see that one single special exists today and not another day. And they're not usually a customer that's coming to you. So if you miss it on the first impression for many of these, they're never coming back. It's all about building trust and loyalty and helping figure out how to get that priority by looking at the leading indicators today that seem trivial.
I think it's smart too as VJ put it, to use that correlation. So while it might not be a big deal today, it will be on Black Friday or on whatever that peak day is. Right. Use that as cost justification for management to focus on it. And the beauty is, most of those things you can anticipate. Black Friday, you've got, and Cyber Monday, you've got Prime Days, you've got these things. Unlike, was it Mike Lively who talked about on the episode where he joined the company? There was that it. Yeah, as a talk show host who mentioned slick deals, and they suddenly had like 7 times the traffic they're used to, and they weren't prepared for it. Everybody's preparing for Black Friday. They're preparing for Amazon Prime Day, these known events that are coming. So it gives you time to prepare, and it gives you the cost or the value justification for investing the money on it. So I think that's
I'll tell you another area where this happens a lot, and it's random, is sneakers. Sneakers are such a insane market right now. You'll have Nike comes out with their new Jordan, or you got Adidas with their new Yeezy, whatever it may be, and it's mostly unpredictable. I mean, it is predictable. There are release schedules. You know it's coming, but it's so frequent, yet such a cult following that all of a sudden you'll just have these massive swaths of people coming to the website. And if that big amount of people coming to the website creates problems for those that have no idea that shoe just released, that's a big problem. For those that are coming, if they have to go into a filtered page that basically says, hey, you're on a wait list, wait here for your chance to be able to buy XYZ shoe, then that's a pretty good experience for that specific user that also protects the other users that are coming. That's pretty bespoke to, specifically sneakers and the way sneakers kind of release, but you can still use that kind of general mentality and approach to really protect your brand from having these sudden moments of surge impact those that have no idea that it's happening. Because those that have no idea that it's happening, that's your important customer set. Those are the ones that you're building the loyalty with. The ones that are coming for that shoe, they're not going to leave for anything. They just want the shoe. They don't care that it's a bad experience.
True. It goes back to what you always say about the speed and the experience is unique to the individual and your brand and what they're buying at that time, because that may be different than Amazon selling something else completely.
No doubt. No doubt about it.
Well, and I think you see the same thing at Christmas with, or holidays with that one hot toy or those 3 hot toys, right? You're going to have some of that same thing where they have limited inventory. You've got a limited window to get it. I don't know if that happens. I haven't bought toys in a while since my daughter's 23, but I think there's a limited window when you can do it.
And
there you go.
All the game systems. There hasn't been a new one in a while, but I'm sure it's coming soon. But also another one that Tickle Me Elmo. Yeah, that's the classic one. Tickle Me Elmo. Oh my.
All right, Dom, what's the next clip we want to listen to on this topic?
All right, the next one we want to listen to is Scott Smith, who's the former product director of organic growth and discovery at FanDuel. He was able to elevate this conversation to the C-suite through his role, which is around driving more organic traffic. So naturally, his team is going to be thinking in terms of traffic and conversions and how those perceive back to something like Google. Here's that clip.
I think that if you just look at our OKRs across the team, we understood that if we could impact the amount of traffic we could get into the experience and then measure how many people were actually converting, you can see, there were opportunities. So it was, very evident in the data to be able to see where we needed to improve upon friction opportunities and lower levels of conversion rates. And I don't think it was really that much of a hard task to just find new ways in which we could improve the overall experience to get people into what we would call an activation faster than they were before. It was, pretty evident in the data that, there were things that we could do to improve upon.
Yeah, I would imagine the ultimate conversion for FanDuel was to get somebody to place that first bet. If they got all the way through the activation process, place that first bet, what you're hoping is they're hooked, and now they continue to come back and place more bets.
Yeah, absolutely. The first bet, I always wanted to expand it a little bit further than that. Like if you look at, how Chamath would always define what an activation was at Facebook was, if you find, what was it, 10 friends in 7 days. And so like, it was more than just activating your account or registering for your account or adding one friend. It was, how do you get somebody to add 10 friends in 7 days? Well, how do you get somebody to, in a sports betting field or a DFS field or whatever, how do you get them to make X number of bets in how many days or whatever that might be? I think there is an opportunity for us to kind of go a little bit further than that.
It's also, I love this. I think the main thing that really resonates with me is that Scott's a He's an expert in the industry about SEO. Yet he's prioritizing the experience and saying, hey, I'm not just going to stop there at making sure that I drive a meaningful engagement enough to get one bet, but I want to get an engaged user. I want to get a loyal user, and I want to use SEO to do it. That just resonates so much, and that's exactly how you get that priority going up. Getting back to the main concept, you're able to start understanding, hey, by prioritizing this effort, not only can we drive more volume to our site, but we can drive more meaningful volume, because we'll be able to get more loyal customers. And by going after this organic mentality like Scott was, you're able to drive users that care. And if you drive users that care, you're obviously going to be driving more of your business than users that are just clicking because they thought the ad was cute, right? There's a big difference between those two users and what it means for our brand. And that's really what's bubbling up to the executives here for Scott, and why he's able to really drive a lot of change.
Well, and Scott didn't share it, but I'm sure they know internally that to get somebody that has never been on FanDuel to get all the way through that process and place that first bet, there's probably a percentage. They know what percentage are going to keep coming back and doing more bets. But I bet you there's an economic value to that they have defined. And that could be, I don't know, $100 or $150. It could be a pretty substantial number. So then if you tie it back to how do you prioritize removing friction in any of that process, it makes the economic decision a relatively easy one, because they can multiply that out and say, hey, if we can get an extra million people to do it at, $100, that's $100 million or whatever that, again, I'm just making up the numbers, but you get the idea. It becomes a really easy conversation with leadership if you can tie it back to something they really care about, which is always money.
This sounds a lot like Office Space suddenly.
That's another TV show I've not seen.
Oh, no. It's a movie. It's a movie.
Movie. Oh, there you go. Okay. It's a movie. Clearly.
So I don't remember the details, but basically they found a way to skim like a penny for every transaction that was allowing them to be able to retire or something. I don't remember all the details, but it's a comedy movie. It's so funny though. It's a real cult classic.
But it's the movie that the show The Office was based on, right?
No, relation whatsoever.
Oh, really? Okay. What's the one The Office is based on? Something completely different?
There was a British version that was based.
There's a British version.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, now I have to find
the graphic on this. Should be Chuck, co-host, has not seen Office Space. I'm gonna get you a red stapler, Chuck.
Well, now I'm gonna have to go watch it. Is it on Netflix? I don't know.
It's probably readily available around.
Okay. All right, Dom. Next clip.
All right, queuing up the next one. And finally, Sean Shealy, former VP, Head of Experience in Technology and Shield Design Systems at US Bank. They approach it from a completely different viewpoint, since banking relationships and customer values are so different from retail or sports betting. He looked at it from the standpoint of cost savings and what markets could they open up by attacking user friction.
So it's interesting when we talk about and we think about friction, and friction has a cost to it, right? When somebody, and we talk a lot in retail examples. So, we're working with brands like Staples, Dick's Sporting Goods, Lowe's. When we think about a consumer encountering friction in their purchase transaction, something that prevents them from completing that transaction, the cost is they'll go to a competitor and complete the transaction there. Banking is really a very different world, right? Because the switching costs are high. Once you've got a checking account set up or a savings account set up, you're not going to just switch banks because you get a lot of friction, doing it. How are you guys thinking about that and even quantifying some of that and the goals and KPIs to measure that friction and how you are accomplishing that in a banking world?
I think that's a great question, and certainly with banking, the way I looked at it, I can't speak for the company as a whole from a certain perspective. The way I see it is, and one of the reasons I joined the bank, I'm all about financial independence and controlling your finances and enabling people to be able to do that. And so the bank opportunity came up, and it was a good fit for me personally. And that is that with US Bank, the brand is trust. Okay, I trust you with my money. you've got my money, you've got my mortgage. Well, first I'm going to have you save my money, then I'm, going to take my mortgage with you. So it's this progressively more invested relationship between the two of you, between the consumer and the brand itself. Whereas with a consumer company, yeah, I mean, or any CPG, retail brand, whatever it happens to be, yeah, I can jump over to the competitor, and because I got blocked here and I couldn't do this, I'm not invested in any way, right? Unless maybe they've got a reward program or something. So the way that we looked at it as a whole, I would say from a leadership point of view, that we owed this to our customers, not just from that relationship, but that if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. And I'll give you an example. Under accessibility, Matthew Lucan, who is now at DQ, the head for accessibility design, head of design accessibility, created a great presentation that showed how much of a market there is for people who have disabilities that need banking services, where everybody needs banking services, right? And why it was important for us. And it's in the billions of dollars, right? To serve that audience. That, you could look at that as a compliance checkbox, or you can say, look, if we serve these people, we bring business in. And, in banking, the money is made on mortgages, right? Everybody knows this, right? That's the big chunk. But you first have to get them in the door. And so when we look at how we look at that customer from the first time, we wanted them to have a great experience. If you needed assistive technology in order to get through an onboarding process, we wanted that to work seamlessly, right? That's the frictionless experience of saying, I came in here, I applied for a savings account or whatever, and back to your mobile screen. How few of clicks can I do? We did find that we could get some of these experiences down to a third of the amount of content in a single screen, and have it accessible, and have a very quick result that got the customer to the next step. So I would say, to your question, we looked at the entirety of all of that and the value in that. Then we started to measure it. Obviously we measure things, but we really began to measure our onboarding process, which in the past really wasn't a great investment of time and effort. Well, my team focused on building all of the input fields that it takes to do that. And I can tell you that 3 years later, they reduced costs by 70% and increased onboarding by, I think, the same amount, 70%, and completion rates went through the ceiling, or through the roof. And all of a sudden we're bringing more customers in, which means we're starting to build trust. And the next stage is to go from, car loan, then from car loan to mortgage. And now that it's actually a new customer channel, right? That didn't exist before, because we simplified the process. We made sure it worked, and that there was no place where that fell off, and we measured it. And now that team, I just heard, is getting some of the largest parts of the budgets this year, because they're getting results. And that's what it takes to get there, right? But there's huge value to the company in respect to that.
That's such a great way to think about friction, because it really highlights that friction is meeting your customers where they are, which is something that we've heard before. Because for many of these customers, accessibility is paramount for them to be able to complete their transaction, and that is a frictionless experience. For most people, that's not necessary. But for those that it is necessary, they're going to go out and seek out the most frictionless experience that they can. And that opens up a whole new market. Now, think about that at a non-accessibility level. It also matters for each of your other customers too, because they are thinking about their own little box. What does their box of success look like? What does their box of frictionlessness look like? Accessibility or non-accessibility, or I guess that's not the right way to say it, but accessibility as a feature set allows you to target a whole new market. And that is just such a great way to be thinking about it, because it's opening up both a individualized friction definition and helping us understand how to just help people.
Box of success. I like that.
I know. No doubt
Frictionless
about it.
box of success.
Frictionless box of success. Unbelievable. So as we kind of recap that, I really get 3 big messages, but they all bubble up into one bigger one, which is, frankly, data-driven with metrics to be able to quantify what occurred. That's the ultimate result. You have to be able to take what you're doing, track it properly and successfully, and understand the value. But to be able to first identify a market that hasn't been tackled properly in accessibility and be able to say, hey, this is $1 billion business, then to be able to say that your business is trust and be able to figure out a way to measure that in the first place. And then finally, the ability to just slim down your pages to be able to go after accessibility. But again, just wrapping that circle right up. It's all about being able to successfully measure and report on it. That's how you get the business buy-in right there. It's exactly what we're trying to say right now.
And for a lot of these businesses, again, that we talk to, it's a numbers game. That those numbers, when you multiply that times hundreds of thousands or millions, that's a big number. It's not inconsequential.
Oh yeah.
So the investment becomes worth it if you can quantify it. To your point.
But yeah, like in this example, like think about the compliance business being quantified as billions. Compliance and accessibility, I should say, in billions, because you would not think that the accessibility market would be that big, but obviously the accessibility market is going to be very, very large and necessary to help. But it's also a very wide array. Like, what does it mean to be accessible? Like those with eye troubles, that needs to be accessible for them. So how do you actually provide a frictionless experience for that specific type? And so as you're going through and quantifying each of those specific types of user sets, meeting your customers where they are, I feel like I'm repeating myself from before in the past this time, but meeting your customers where they are means figuring out each of those different data-driven models that create the population with which can drive additional incremental dollars.
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting because he kind of alluded to it, but I bet a lot of companies just think of things like accessibility as a checkbox and not as an opportunity as they saw it.
That was really interesting too. One thing that we don't really cover is on the other side of that. Once you go through this process, right, of the tackling the onboarding process that Sean started talking about, it starts to become why, right? What's in it for me, right? For my team to kind of start going down this path. And Sean at the very end talks about how amazing it was that team now, because they've proven revenue can come from this model, is getting a large share of budget. So maybe you get that extra headcount. Maybe you get that extra tool that you've been putting off. So tackling these have dividends that pay out to you as a team, which was kind of interesting to hear there.
Yeah, always comes back to the dollars, doesn't it? Whether that's incremental revenue or savings, as he alluded to on the 70% reduction in onboarding costs.
It's kind of a shame that it has to, because we're talking about accessibility right now.
All right. So when we think about aligning teams and using testing to identify changes that have the greatest impact, one of the major challenges in optimizing digital experiences is ensuring that all those teams are aligned and focus on the same goals. And what we saw from our guests was they emphasized the importance of testing and collaboration across teams to drive impactful changes.
Let's start with a clip from Sean Shealy of US Bank, who shared his insights on aligning teams to create frictionless customer experiences.
I think the most important thing, and I said this all the time, was that you need to really explain to leadership what great experience, or in your cases, we talk about frictionless. Why is this? Where's their value in this? What is the value in this? And so the way that you do that is that, let's say that you're listening to this and you work within a product team, and you have designers, you have engineers. I think the best thing that you can do is get those engineers and designers sitting next to each other first, right? And getting them iterating. Be willing to not just say, this is my design, build it, right? But have a clear, designers are going to design and engineers are going to code. But if you have a clear objective across your team as to what you want that outcome to be, what would be a great outcome for our customers? You asked previously what our mantra was at the bank. It was always customer first, right? If we can all agree that the customer will have a great experience when this happens, and then I can roll out more features or more products to them within this set, right? I can build a backlog of things and I can test them and see if they work. If you're not doing that already, start thinking about really, as we talk about design system, we're talking about experience. Let me put it this way. Designers, if you think of a art director, designer purely in this form, We had another role within the design team called information architects. And this has sort of been a term that's been kicked around a lot. But this idea that you're doing service design, or you're doing design that's not visual design, right? You're designing experience. I think that's where teams can take away some of this immediately and say, look, how can we make this easier for our customers? And that starts with defining, I call it the spine. You take this spine, you say, this is from the beginning of the experience to the end of the experience. This is what the customer needs to do. And the question is, at each aspect of that, okay, these are the APIs, this is the back end where the data goes. We all know that. Once the customer starts working with it here, who needs to be involved, right? Is this research, design, engineering? Okay, let's solve this problem. That's what we did with this document upload product. I said, well, okay, we have two customers. One is the person who's implementing the application. The other was the customer who's using it. So let's make it easy to implement. So there's basically a configuration file. You go through, there's an interface where you check all the boxes, click a button, gives you a configuration file. You can use the application. The customer side, I only show them what they need so I can come in with a profile, right? When you break that functionality down in that way, and back to your question, get each team working on those harder issues and solving for them. And back to the question we just answered around the larger problem, the mindset. It's not one person who's going to decide that. The product owner shouldn't be making this decision. It's not a democracy. It's a iterative solution. This is the framework we're going to use. Here's how we're going to hang everything off the spine, right? And here's the loop back to how we're going to do this in an agile way. I think that's the big thing. Get your mindset into, how do I define this in a way that I have everybody aligned with that objective, right? This clears the clutter out.
I love it. This reminds me of a concept that we used to, I guess, loosely label called 4 in a box. 4 in a box is basically just how you bring all of the different owners of any specific outcome-based mentality into one concise message with one concise goal. That allows you to march in a specific order. But something else he also kind of talks about is that you just have that outcome-based mentality that is all about how you can figure out what you actually set your sights on, so that you as a larger organization can work to design the experience, which, as we're talking about this, it's elevating to the C-suite. We also heard from Mike Shady back many episodes ago where he's talking about the aesthetics of the journey, which is exactly what Sean's talking about here. So there's a case where Sean is literally elevating to the C-suite. Mike Shady, now CDO over at Staples. That's exactly what we're talking about. He's talking about how to bring this concept up by uniting into the one team that has an outcome-based mentality to design the experience for the likes of the CDO. It's all just kind of wrapping up together real quick here.
Well, I think another thing that he mentioned that we've heard from other guests on the podcast outside of this series, like, was the concept of engineering and product sitting together and working together as sort of one functional team physically, you know, for those that are still in offices after the pandemic. Mit Singh from Verizon, if you remember, he talked about that, where they were in different buildings and they combined them into the same group because they could get things done faster by having them sit together and think together and unify their efforts physically and digitally speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. But every time I listen to that clip, he says designers are going to design and engineers are going to code. But I hear in my head, designers are going to design and engineers are going to engine. I've listened to that clip over and over and over again, and my brain goes there every time, and I'm like, I'm disappointed just a little bit.
And you know where I thought you were going to go? And players going to play. That's what I thought you were going to say.
Oh, no. I am in Atlanta. I'm just letting you know.
It's true. It's true. The hip hop scene. All right, Dom, what's next? What's the next clip?
All right, next up we have Catherine Geniak of American Eagle, who's currently the Director of Digital Experience Design. Catherine talked about the importance of being a team builder, regardless of what your role is. Here's that clip.
Truly, I mean, that is like a lot of why I think designers don't really good, successful designers are actually going to be better relationship builders first and foremost than they are going to be designers. And I think designers who want to move forward in their careers have to be like relationship and like lay of the land understanders more than anything else. And in the beginnings of a career, the way I like to talk to my team to get them thinking that way is like, hey, let's say it's your first 2 or 3 months at American Eagle on my team. You're going to hear me say, like, I know you're thinking about this aesthetically, and you're thinking about this from a friction standpoint. You're thinking about this from UX best principles, everything you've always learned in school or wherever. But when you show this in art review and you wonder where all the feedback's coming from and everyone feels emotional and passionate, it's because you are literally the first person who's ever taken the work of all these dozens of people, the copywriters, the photographers, the site merchants, the people who design the clothing. Like, it goes all the way up the product lifecycle chain, right? You're the first person who's actually putting all those pieces together in the first comp of what they will actually see when it hits the site. And so you're not just designing a thing, you're actually building a puzzle, and you're bringing someone else's work into like a visual plane with the 25,000 other pieces that it goes with for the first time ever. And that's why when people see things, they often tend to react, and it's passionate, and it's not ever really about the UX or about our work. It's about like a lot more than that, right? And so, like, yeah, you get it, being between two teams, trying to be the bridge. And I really try to get designers to think about that as like, you're representing all these other departments when you're putting their puzzle pieces together.
I love that. Not only did that quote kind of come off of a concept that I was talking about, where I felt like I was a fence sitter for, both of the different roles, or both of the major roles, I should say, at Home Depot, either leaning towards the engineering side or leaning toward the product side. I on both sides, I was a fence sitter where I felt like I was communicating for the other side. But what's really happening here as a designer is you're really working to take that information that's being given to you from a learning of someone who knows something important, and you're figuring out how to design something that's great to be able to hit that goal. So it's kind of merging the creative with the analytical, and you have to be able to talk properly and communicate properly as a group to be able to say, this is how we take what you know and what you are an absolute expert on, and I can turn that into reality for you. And it's bringing those two together to actually produce results, and the designer plays such an integral role in that.
Yeah, and as a marketer, I get it. I get that whole concept that she talked about, how you're bringing together all these different ideas, and then people are seeing it for the first time. It's when we redo websites. I can talk about all day long. I can talk about copy documents and strategy documents, and you've seen this in some of the work we're doing at the company, like on our homepage. It's not until you can see that final design and see it with the imagery and see it with the product shots and see it with everything else that it's like, okay, now I see it as the consumer is going to see it, or as the consumer for this product. And it just doesn't make sense until then. And I could see that aha moment. And her point in, if you've built strong relationships, if you've brought all these teams together, you're going to have a positive experience with that. If you are a lone wolf and you come bouncing in at the end and you come in and show this and they haven't been involved along the way, I think you're going to get a lot more pushback.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And, I can speak to your example directly. You asked for some feedback on exactly that project. I had no idea what you were talking about, and I started providing some feedback, and it was out of context of the goal in mind. So it didn't work as well until you gave me that context. That's the same thing that's happening in any example, especially with designers, because you're talking about how do you go get feedback off of something that is incomplete or out of context of its end goal without it distracting or creating some type of faulty lesson or faulty feedback. So as you're working to figure this out, you have to always think from the end up, and that's really what a designer's doing for us.
Oh, and I think it highlights too the problem with sometimes focusing on a single metric out of context of the entire experience. For example, site speed, which is a topic we've covered on several episodes of. If you focus only on site speed, you might still be creating a poor experience, or getting all greens on your core web vital scores, right? Can sometimes lead to a poor actual user experience. So you might end up with an experience Google likes, but the consumer doesn't if you over index on a single data point.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
All right, let's move on to that third big idea that came out of this series, Elevating to the C-Suite, and that was to pay attention to the voice of the customer.
Okay, let's cover one last idea that every guest seemed to talk about quite a bit, and that's understanding the customer's journey and where they're struggling and what is crucial for creating frictionless experiences. Listening to the voice of the customer can help identify and address pain points effectively, so many of our guests have said. So let's start with a clip from Scott Smith back at FanDuel, who discussed starting with talking about how they benchmark what their competitors are doing. And Scott took a surprising direction with this one. Take a listen.
I always kind of push the team to say, yeah, be aware, but don't get distracted by what other companies are doing, because who's to say that theirs is right and ours is wrong, or ours is right and theirs is wrong? The people to say that is the customer themselves. So we tried to, really spend a lot more time with doing the customer research and understanding who is interacting, how are they interacting, why are they interacting, who's searching on Google, and what are they searching for, and how do we make sure that we're providing them with the right experience once they do land within our web products and web experiences. Because if we're only looking at the competitors, then who's to say that they're actually asking the customers the same thing? So if we focused on making sure the customer saw value in what we were providing to them, that's where we wanted to maintain that focus and see wins and continue to see improved engagement, optimization opportunities, and continue to grow from there.
Your customers are your customers, and they're your customers because your brand resonates with them better than other brands. And as you start to think about what that means, you'll start to separate yourself from thinking too competitively, because what you really have to do when you're talking competitive metrics, it isn't let me go make sure my journeys are the same. It's who is better at actually taking the traffic that they get, the people that like them, and making sense of that. And that's something that is so important in building frictionless experiences. Not everyone's going to like to go to Etsy. Not everyone likes to go to Amazon. Not everyone likes Target. Yet each of these have different types of people that enjoy that experience. Some people like to go to the store and supplement their experience with the app. Some people would rather not be connected to anything at all ever. And some people are only going to shop at home because that's what's comfortable to them. And meeting your customer where they are is where you start to champion this and stop thinking purely competitive. You might be able to learn something important from other customers, or rather other brands of their customers, but you have to remember that their customer base is fundamentally a different set of people telling them different things that are just simply not going to translate in the same way. So if you go try to just copy and paste what somebody else is doing and think it's going to be successful for the people that resonate towards your brand, hey, you might get lucky and you might be right, but probably not.
Yeah, something interesting you said there, because I think we operate in this vacuum from our own perspective. So we become an audience of one and start thinking about what we like. And for example, you said some people don't like Amazon. I'm like, who doesn't like Amazon? I give Amazon gift certificates. I've done it. But Dom knows, we actually had somebody on the team who had a philosophical, fundamental issue with Amazon. And so if I give an Amazon gift card, she'd never even cash it. Or if the company gave it, it's like it was like the first person I'd ever encountered that didn't like an Amazon gift card. So we just assume we work from our own mindset, or maybe our own company's mindset, and we make a lot of assumptions about what our customers really want.
I'll tell you what, from inside the walls at Home Depot, there's very much a like, oh, you used Amazon? Oh, and it could be for something totally non-competitive. It's just like, ooh, oh no.
You can't support Amazon. My gosh, they're the enemy. They're the enemy of everybody.
It's totally facetious, but it's real. I mean, it's like an aspect of, you know, if you're going to go help your counter brand go develop something and then start to try to encroach. And in Home Depot's sense, what protects Home Depot from the Amazon monster, if you will, is that they have the big and bulky. It's really, really difficult to do big and bulky and deliver it in a meaningful way. You need stores to do that. Amazon's going to really struggle to ever get into the lumber business in a meaningful way. They'll be able to do, you know, small boards here and there, maybe, you know, craft boards for woodworkers, but studs and, you know, things that take, you know, hundreds to do a single project. It's really, really difficult to do that. And that's something that Home Depot is always going to have the advantage of, just thinking very specific to that example. But when you're talking about what it means to help another brand to then be able to potentially come into your brand, because hey, that's kind of what Amazon does, is they kind of look out. And right now, I think the latest and greatest that Amazon's trying to do is pharmacy. So now all of a sudden they're trying to compete with CVS and Walgreens and you know, Publix Pharmacy or Target Pharmacy. I guess that's just CVS, but you kind of get the point. So as you kind of like support Amazon, I'm going on this little rant about Amazon now, but as you support Amazon in anything, you're kind of helping them come into, you know, new markets.
I should say anybody who's listening from Amazon is going to probably sitting there going, you can buy a tiny house on Amazon. So we're not limited on size. It's true. They actually sell tiny house kits.
That's funny. Yeah, but that's different than big and bulky. Big and bulky is like bags of concrete. Can you buy bags of concrete on Amazon?
I have no idea.
Maybe one.
Yeah. Sorry, Dom, go ahead. Your point.
No. Part of what Nick was saying reminded me a lot of your guys' conversation with Mike Shady, who was talking about how big and bulky, when Nick was talking about it, is such an important factor. You know, if you're at home and you have a broken appliance and Lowe's, in his example, isn't able to get that delivery date right or provide that service to you in a meaningful way, your entire perspective of Lowe's starts to dissipate a little bit, because you are now inconvenienced by this food that's going bad or whatever the case is. And it's all Lowe's fault in that instance. So I thought that was really kind of interesting and meaningful. So, you know, you get those Amazon deliveries that are, you know, maybe dented or at the bottom of the stairs and they're supposed to be to the door. And it's very quick that is a poor experience for something very bulky.
Yeah. And a good point. And then another thing that Scott said that you talk a lot about, Nick, is, and you said at the beginning of this, as your customers are your customers, you know, sports betting, which is the space he was in, there's lots of different sports bettors. And it hit me last night because he mentioned that Fanatics had just gotten into sports betting. And I happened to be watching TV last night. And there's a Fanatics commercial for their sports betting came on. And their play is you earn points. Because if you know Fanatics, they were originally the apparel. They're the apparel for MLB and NFL and all those companies, right? They're the company that runs those stores. And so that's their new thing is when you play their betting app, you get points you can redeem for merchandise. So you can bet against a particular team and then get their merchandise, or bet on, for a team and get their actual merchandise using the points you earn. So, but that's probably going to appeal to somebody who likes the merchandise, right? Likes the merch, and could be very different customer than FanDuel's customer.
That reminds me of, you know, I play pool, and there's a league called the American Pool Association, APA. And if you play, I think it's 1,000 matches, you get a jean jacket. That's like iconic, right? Like everybody in APA knows about this jean jacket. But then if you just like go think about what it takes to, you know, play in these matches, not only that, but you're grabbing a drink every time you're there. So it's like $40,000 for this jean jacket. It's like, wow.
That's an expensive jean jacket. That's more expensive than these frictionless experience polo shirts.
Aren't they nice though? Oh man.
They are. Travis Matthews. Very nice. That's courtesy of Nick. All right, Dom, what's the next clip?
All right, guys. Now let's listen to a clip from VJ of Walmart on the importance of putting the customer first.
So I think one is easy. If you were to say like just like, hey, give me like one thing that they should do, then that's easy, right? Like the first, second, and third that I would probably tell you for now is like, put customers in front of you, right? Solve for their problems as easy as they possibly can. They're not coming by to any retailer to just hang out and, not do anything. So they are coming there to like solve a particular problem. So help them solve the problem, whatever it might be. It could be inspiration. It could be like buying the specific type of like milk that I want and get that milk. So solving a particular problem and staying close to customers is what I would be, focusing on all the time.
Yeah, and this is something that's just so important. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been in some type of meeting, and in that meeting we end up talking about some specific data attribute, and there's some readout, and you start diving into the data and you're like, wait, how did they get this conclusion? And it's because they're not talking to their customers. And something that is it's kind of a hyperbole, but it kind of gets the point across. But you have, you might have a session replay and you're watching one specific user, and this specific user's mouse is just like fading off to the left consistently. It's just like, it's really erratic behavior with the mouse. And you think, oh, this customer's frustrated. But the analyst then looks at it and says something like, oh, no, they're not frustrated. They're just trying to click this feature over here and they can't reach it, or whatever it may be. When in reality, it's just this user's falling asleep while at the keyboard. And a lot of that is a hyperbolic example to basically say, if you're not understanding what your customers are actually telling you with the data, then the data is meaningless anyway. So you're looking at all of this information, you're consuming it, and you're trying to make a good conclusion. But if you're not actually asking your customers what's important and figuring out from your customers somehow, some way, and I get in a B2C example, it's very difficult to do that in a meaningful way. You can't just go and knock on their door and say, hey, I see you, according to my data, you happen to be on our website right now. Can you, come talk to me? You can't do that, obviously. But what you can do does allow you to understand how to aggregate information and be able to make sure your conclusions in the data are meaningful. Because if they're not, you're going to make the wrong website.
Well, and it comes back to what Vijay was saying is, what are they trying to accomplish? Understanding the context. Again, that word comes back up. Understand the context of what they're trying to accomplish and what's preventing them from accomplishing it. In the B2B side of it, we talk in terms of jobs to be done. That's a common framework. And maybe that's actually, now that I think about it, I think Jason Abdo talked about that as well. So maybe that's a common even in the consumer side. But what's the job to be done that they're trying to accomplish? And there's just no substitute for that consumer voice. One great example, quick side story here. 2 companies ago, we had a product that was first of its kind that could measure if you saw an ad and compared you to a control group, and you saw an ad and Dom was in the control group and he didn't see the ad on your phone, did you go in the store and buy more of that toilet paper than Dom did as a result of seeing that ad? And people hadn't done that before. And we were out trying to sell it, and the sales team kept saying, yeah, we're really struggling to get people to buy it. So we ended up doing focus groups, and we were shocked because what we heard consistently was nobody actually believed it was possible. There were literally people in there saying, wait a minute, some guy down in the basement has that data. I don't even have access to that data. How could they know if somebody bought? That just isn't possible. I don't even think that's possible. So we had a believability problem. And we actually created ads that went on the front of Adweek going, you probably think we're lying. And then in giant letters and then little letters about tying sales to, your mobile ad. And then we talked about it. So we just hit it head on, and we got past that believability by just saying, hey, we know we know you think you're lying, but it can be. But the point of all that was we would never have known if we didn't talk to the customer, if we didn't talk to people we were trying to sell to and understand why they were having this problem.
All right, guys. Finally, let's hear from Catherine from American Eagle, who shares how feedback tools can identify friction points in the customer journey.
So I have a peer within our UX space who's the director of UX architecture, and he and I break our teams kind of down into half. So the UX architecture side of our team is really responsible for, I have an analogy for this too. It's important to have analogies in this business because if you're not in it, it's very hard to understand. But the analogy we use for this is like, go do the archaeological dig. Like the architecture team goes and finds, hey, what are our friction points? They look at our internal tools. They look at our voice of the customer inputs. They look at third-party competitors. There's a lot of different ways we're doing that, like what's out there? What should we be chasing after? What do we have in our own house that is friction-y or problematic? So they unearth it. And then when we put it all in the backlog and we get it prioritized. And then when it gets picked up and the developer is going to have time and bandwidth to work on it, that's when my team takes it. That my team's that experienced design arm. So we're really taking a high level concept idea or that friction point that was found, and we're turning it into that final digital experience for site or app. So we've got designers on my side, we've got architects and researchers on that side, and then we also have a customer insights team too that's doing a lot more high level research at many different levels of the business.
Gotcha. And how are you measuring or quantifying that friction in the customer journey?
We use different tools. We've used a few in the past couple of years, but there's really nice, more user-friendly tools out there that allow you to pull your website up and actually see like, where are people clicking? Where are they not clicking? What point on the page are they scrolling to? Where are they not getting to at all? I got an email this morning about where my counterpart Matt pulled up by working with our tool. Like there's a bunch of people rage clicking on this modal because the click point on the X, the padding around it's not big enough, and they're clicking in the vicinity, but they're not hitting it. And so there's just a lot of frustration. So he was able to run a report and find that. Now my team doesn't have to get involved. Development's just going to go in there and make that pad bigger. But if we find something that's like, ooh, that's spicy, you know, it's a way to look at our site. One of the things that, you know, I love having a tool like that at our disposal because it solves a lot of those assumption conversations that waste a lot of time, right? Like, well, does anyone know how many people get down to that bottom of the page, or where's the scroll? Like if one more person says like, where's the fold on the page, or how far do people scroll? Like, it doesn't matter. Let's just look in this tool and see, hey guys, this button's really important. 70% of your traffic coming to this page is clicking on this button. We can't take the button off the page. And they're like, really? But that's not the purpose of the page. I'm like, I think the customer is telling you that the purpose of the page is that button. If 70% of the traffic coming to the page is clicking that button, right? So sometimes it helps reframe internal storytelling, shorten internal storytelling, and help us make decisions a lot faster. Yeah. Data gives you the voice of the customer that helps.
In another case of Nick doesn't read show notes, he roasts unintentionally the next clip. Holy cow. I was just talking about how you can create faulty conclusions after looking at data in the wrong way. And Catherine isn't doing that here. She's certainly approaching this correctly, but man, she gets something so right. The customer is telling you what's important, and that's what you need to take out of this. Don't let your bias, let your pride, throw it out the door. Listen to your customers in whatever way you possibly can. And in this case, you're listening to your customers, no matter what you think that button is and the lack of importance of that button. 70% of customers are clicking that button. But man, is it so important to make sure you're getting good conclusions out of this. She's talking about getting a learning of how people were rage clicking around the X. Maybe that's not actually rage clicks, right? How do you know that that's actually rage clicks? How do you know that it's not just non-responsiveness? Maybe they are clicking the X successfully, but it's not closing. Now, I don't know what the actual situation was there, but what I'm trying to say is that there are rational explanations that help you understand that it doesn't mean make the X bigger because they're missing the X. There are other reasons behind the data, and you have to make sure you exhaust the understanding of the data before you make these conclusions. So as you're really starting to dig in and understand where you can find meaningful, important aspects to this data, it's what the customer is telling you. I'm going to end it there.
Well, and this is relatively new, right? 10 years ago, you probably couldn't tell a lot of this stuff. You had to do a lot of guesswork. And now there's so many ways to bring that data together, not just in session replay, like Catherine's talking about, other types of tools that allow you to really get the insight and start to uncover what's happening, especially across customer sessions, and start to see patterns that give you those friction points that are important to change. All right. So I think we cover, I think there were some really interesting takeaways from this series. It was a fun series and we appreciate all the guests that participated in it, but I definitely think these 3 conclusions were good conclusions. And I think as we talked, we even found other episodes where they fit. So I think any last advice for anybody before we wrap up this episode, Nick?
I think we really kind of exhausted it a bit. I'd say the biggest summary is listen to your customers, because that's how you can create a meaningful way to improve your website, to gain that priority from your executives. It all wraps up into a nice, tight, it's the intersection of the tactical and the practical.
Well said. Great conclusion. So thanks for tuning into this episode of the Frictionless Experience podcast. Remember to follow us on your favorite podcast player app so you can automatically receive notifications when we upload new episodes. And be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Let us know what you think and what topics you want us to cover in future episodes. We're happy to cover anything that's causing you friction. And of course, you can always find and connect with me and Nick on LinkedIn. I'm at Chuck Moxley.
I'm at in Palladino, I think. And go find Dom. He's at Dom Costa.
Oh, sorry. I totally forgot Dom.
That's all right. Don't find me.
No, just put this all in there. Let it fly. Come on.
All right. And it's Dom Costa.
I think it might be Dominic.
Yeah, it is Dominic Costa.
With a C and a K or just a K? I can't remember.
CK.
CK.